And we're now live. All right. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Today, as promised, I've promised in high demand for a long time now. We've been asking for an ME, and I have a very good friend and colleague. We have MEC Mike Nishikawa,
Hey, everybody.
who I have known for 17, 18 years now, I think.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's going on this June will be 17 years. So yeah, a little
Oh,
over
wow.
16 and a half. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. And you were with me from the beginning, right? I was the first you reported in to me. You were calling me a chief way back then, even when I was like an E4, E5.
Yeah, buddy. I remember coming in 2008 to Sector San Francisco, and
Yeah.
my orders didn't have a particular unit to
Still
go to.
recognized.
There it is, right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I showed up, and there was an SKC, chief storekeeper, and he said, well, there's no one here, right? It's a weekend. I said,
Uh-huh.
okay. And he pointed me to the MSTs over at Management Division at the time, IMD.
Oh, okay.
And I showed up, and then we just, like you said, we met, started to meet some of the other crew in the group and stuff, and kind of just went from there.
So your first year or so in the reserves was really not like PSU stuff. It was
No, not at all. It was probably the exact opposite of what a lot of people, when they initially get in to the service and they're specific in what they want to do.
Right.
I think that's now kind of been evened out, if you will, or worked through. So for me, I was a PS. That rate has now legacied. So a port security specialist, and a lot of my friends, when I went in, they went straight to PSUs, and I, for whatever reason, went straight to sector. So I was a quasi, a PS and an MST at the same time, doing scat patrols and HARPATs and all the other stuff with you, working on FOSCR type things. So,
right. I never knew that you were actually. It sounds like you almost just by a fluke came to IMD, because you ran into an SKC who's like, "Hey, why don't you just go over to that IMD building over there?" And is that kind of how that happened? Okay.
Yeah, you guys were the only ones in the office that particular weekend that I showed up, and he just put me there. And I remember, if you remember, a Lieutenant Commander Wasserman. He was in charge of the group, right? Worked for National Park Service. Anyways, I
do remember.
Said, come on in, right? And we had a couple of chiefs at the time. Well, one, and then a MST one who ended up becoming a chief, Chief Frank Fagoni.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now retired, but we were working all together, and that's just how it happened. That's how my intro into the Coast Guard was. I slated and I tested to become a PS, and I eventually got to the school, the last one, in 2009 before they legacied it, and then that's how I transitioned to ME, because at our graduation, our class, they handed us a slip of paper and it said, you either sign this and go ME, or you find another rate, or you can get out of the Coast Guard.
As soon as you finished the training itself.
Yep.
Congratulations, your training is now obsolete.
Exactly. It was good stuff to learn. Very PSU centric, obviously, but I didn't make my way to a PSU until years down the line. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you definitely, I mean, you exemplified Semper Gumby, right? That Semper always flexible. Like, you came to us at Sector San Fran, and you were just like gung ho. Like, I didn't even know at first that you were not supposed to be an MST, because you were so, like, you were there. You know, you're the epitome of like, well, if I'm here, I'm here. You know, I'm going to be present. I'm just going to support the mission. And you never complain. You never like, I'm not supposed to be here. You know.
I think it's the same for a lot of people when they're younger and they join something that they don't really have a full grasp of, right, in their mind.
Right.
And so I wouldn't say I was uber young. I joined when I was 23, but I didn't know the full breadth and length, if you will, of the Coast Guard and all that it had to offer and its mission sets and people and all that stuff. So I was genuinely, and I still am, super excited to have been there and to meet people and to get to know them. And
Hmm.
I can say, like most people probably would, yeah, I can attribute some of that stuff to my own personality and how I'm an easygoing kind of individual and just make friends and all that other stuff. But
Right.
it was something new and a skill set that obviously I wasn't tapping into because I didn't have that. And so it was just really cool to get out and just do something. So every time you guys taught me things and, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what it's called, getting those acronyms and all that stuff, man, that was really cool to have that, at least from my perspective.
For sure. Yeah. No, and I think it's kind of ironically in a way, you and I did not have sources like this right here when we went through like in the early to mid 2000s. There wasn't really YouTube channels like this that hopefully, with what we're doing here today, you can help some folks not be quite as lost as we might have felt when we first showed up to our units at the, but at the same time, we can't fill in all the gaps. There's always going to be those unknowns that people
Yeah.
experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're definitely right about that.
So, how about we dive into some of these pre-selected questions, and then we'll grab some of the live questions as they come in.
Yeah, I love it.
The ME rating has probably been the most in-demand rating I've gotten on this channel. So you're like a celebrity here. So there's been
Hopefully
a
I live
lot of
up to the
questions.
hype.
I have some of these questions from like a year ago. I feel bad. Like I some of these people probably already joined the Marines or something, but still good information to get out there.
Absolutely.
So, all right, we'll start with the basic one here. Is it hard to become an ME? Or maybe a better way to phrase it is, how hard is it to become an ME?
It's a good question. I would say it's a very personal thing. Um, so that's one part of it. The other part I would say is if you, at some point in time, which I'm sure that you probably would, to be able to answer some of these, what I feel baseline questions are, to have a
Mhm.
recruiter on to be able to talk about that other side of the house of it. But personally, I don't find it hard to be an ME. When people come in now, especially as a reservist, I know our current RFMC, Rating Force Master Chief, and people that typically want to come into the Coast Guard and they want to come into law enforcement, it's because they're already law enforcement on the outside. So
Mhm.
they're part of a sheriff's organization, a police department, National Park Service, something that has some sort of law enforcement component to it. And so with that, when you come in, it's clearly not that difficult, right? You do it for a living in your civilian job, and you're going to try to translate that to your military career. So coming in, that's not difficult. If you are none of those things and you're just someone that wants to join the Coast Guard, you want to love the service, you happen to maybe meet with a recruiter or talk to families and friends, and they said, "Oh, ME," and they kind of gave you an idea of what it was because of how they heard about it.
Mhm.
So basically, you hear law enforcement, or I get to carry a gun, or whatever, or you've seen YouTube videos of guys knocking on narco subs. That type of stuff, then for those individuals, is all based off of really your ASVAB. When you go through, right, the MEP station like you and I did back in the day, you're
Right.
going to get tested. You're going to sit there and it's going to be arithmetic, math, science, all that stuff. That number that you get will then equate to what your score is. So that number equal in score, then to obviously what it is that the jobs that are available to you in the Coast Guard. Each rate, like yours, MST, is really high, a number. ME, I think, is kind of high up there. ETs, electronic technicians. So based on your number will be where you will land and seeing what jobs are available to you. Now I know that they still offer waivers. So if you're within a certain point or two of ME and your original score wasn't good enough, you could have the recruiter put in a waiver for you to be able to get that job if you wanted. That's how I was able to get PS.
I see. Okay. So, and you know what I realized we kind of glossed over. We talked about how we met in the Coast Guard, but we didn't really talk about where you're at right now. Do you want to give just a brief summary of kind of how your career has gone as an ME? I mean, you talked about how you were almost going to be a PS, and then they're like, Uno's reverse, you're now going to be an ME. But you want to just kind of talk briefly about just how your career has kind of progressed?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as I mentioned, right, got in 08 was PS, met you guys. So about for 13 months, I was part-time MST guy and PS. Got to the last A school in 2009, graduated there, transitioned directly into ME just because of the paper that we signed. Then from there, I stuck around Sector San Francisco and worked my way into Sector Boarding Team. Some places also have it called VBSTs, Vessel Boarding Security Teams. So I was able to actually work with other MEs and stuff that's exactly what I wanted to be able to do, right? So did that for a lot of years. And then in 2016, 2017, I went over to the PSU. That was, a little side note, not my fault really per se, but in the Coast Guard, we treat every individual that we have as an adult, right? Scores are really high. You probably come from the outside with some sort of experience instead of just being straight out of high school, stuff of that nature, right? So what I mean by that is every 5 years or so, depending on the unit that you're attached to, you have to tell the Coast Guard if you want to stay with them, as I'm sure you know. And for me, I was coming up on my 10th year at Sector Boarding Team, and I forgot to put in my request through one of our online applications called DA. And so at one point, a lieutenant of mine at Sector Boarding Team had said, "Hey, congratulations, Nish." I said, "What are you talking about, sir?" He said, "You're going to the PSU." I was like, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "No way." And I couldn't believe it. So a lot of people generally don't like being told what to do. Why'd you join the military if you don't like being told what to do? Anyways, that's for another time. But I moved over there. I wasn't too pleased with it, but it's just like anything. Maybe a little fear of the unknown type stuff. But I went in 16, 17, went to the PSU, knew still a lot of the same individuals, and I loved it. I still love it, right? It's a great unit. It is very niche and specific to what different mission set and style it is for the Coast Guard. But I did that for about 6.5 years at a PSU located here in San Francisco, California. For me, I then in April of 2023, 24, I transitioned and now I'm at Sector Boarding Team in San Diego, California. So I've transitioned now. I lead a team along with 3 other fellow chiefs. We each have our own team and we just run it. And we work a lot with different interagencies, especially because we have a JHAWC, a joint operational component. And that includes Harbor Patrol, CBP, AMO, Air Marine operations, all that type of stuff. So it's really cool to be able to be doing the actual ME stuff in terms of the law enforcement side of it again.
Nice. So all that time you spent with me early on was not wasted time then. All those harbor patrols I took you on came into use then, right?
Very useful.
Okay, well that background kind of segues nicely into this next question. If I were to join the PSU as a reserve, can I opt for more deployments, possibly with other PSUs? The reason being, they don't authorize ADOS for MEs, and I don't want to have to sit around waiting to deploy. This person basically wants to deploy as much as possible. So is that something, how does that work?
Yeah, so for PSUs, the old way used to be about every 3 years. We have 8 PSUs in the Coast Guard. They're all strategically placed throughout the continental US. And depending on where you are, what coast you're in and such is how that used to be, right? There was a steady mission, you would always go on it. Well, now that that steady mission has gone away, the PSUs, our higher ups, we're trying to find, we have a highly trained units, and they're specialized in a certain thing, how can we make them useful again? And maybe useful is not the right word, but how can we continue to utilize them to the best of their abilities? And so, as such, they looked at tapping into the DoD partners. And so that's where things are now. There's a lot of missions going on, a lot of PSUs deploying, and it's not every 3 years you got to wait for your turn to go up. It's every 9 months to a year that your team, specifically your home unit, is going to be out and doing stuff. So if you were to join a PSU, like you said, can you opt in for more deployments? The short answer is yes. The longer answer for those watching, I just want to set, we'll say, reality expectations, is that it depends on when you join your particular unit, your PSU, and what cycle that they are in the deployment and where that's going to look. So if that were to happen and you were to join it, if the unit has already left, then you're going to be sticking around your unit, because, again, some other expectations to set reality-wise is that you got to get trained up, right? You're new to a PSU. So it typically could take you about 6 months to a year to get, we'll just say, fully qualified in what you need to do at a bare minimum. But the deployments and picking up stuff with other PSUs is definitely a possibility. Every PSU usually always augments with another PSU if they don't have the numbers to meet what the mission requirement is set for. As you mentioned, they don't authorize ADOS to a certain extent. The ADOS for this person that was asking the question is just referring to what you and I were used to. If there was something, we'll say, what's the one that's up in the Great Lakes that I'm blanking on, but there's a thing here in the summer in California called Delta Blitz in Northern California. So it's up on the rivers and the deltas, right?
Sure.
For MEs that come from out of state, there's ADOS opportunities, again, in our platform called DA, that you can look at mobilization resumes and you can say, oh, I want to do this or I want to do that. That's the place I was thinking of, Summer Stock. So just like that, those are ADOS opportunities. Well, there are ADOS opportunities for MEs at PSUs, but what people have to realize is that it's very dependent on, obviously, a lot of certain things, money, funding for one. Two, especially for what your specific job is. And what I mean by that is, yes, you're an ME, but for myself, the last 3 years I was with my PSU, I was a training petty officer. So not my job, I should say, more my title. And my title of doing that authorized me to be able to be on back-to-back ADOS orders, because I was specifically doing a job for my unit at my PSU. So you can have those opportunities for sure. Are you necessarily deploying in those moments? No. You're going in like a Monday through Friday, like any other civilian job, and you're doing work of whatever that job title is that you're there for, to be on orders for. So you don't necessarily have to be waiting around to wrap everything up about picking up orders to go with the PSU or this, that, the other, but just wanted to set some reality expectations for those watching that, yeah, you can pick them up. It'll just, again, depend on one thing for sure, a timing thing of when you entered into your PSU.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Good answers. So this question I'm going to ask, it's what would you do as a non-specialized ME? And I think this was another question related to this was, when you're, well, obviously kind of in that area you just talked about, like that first 6 months to a year when you're getting bare minimum qualified.
Okay.
What are you doing? And specifically, I think the meat and the potatoes of this question was, if I'm not going on ADOS or I'm not deploying and I'm not fully qualified, what am I doing on the weekends? Am I just sitting around? You know, what is that life like?
Yeah. Okay. As I was hearing you ask me this question, and for whoever this was that wanted an answer, just anyone in general, I see two streams of thought for this. One for the PSU side and one for the ME side that is at a non-PSU. So if you're a non-specialized ME, you're not qualified in anything, your drill weekends at a PSU will look very much as training opportunities, because for PSUs, they are training to deploy. So
Right.
you're getting weapons qualifications, you're learning the minimum qualification as an ME at a PSU, which is in a shoreside security division, SSD. And what they do there is they have FTMs, fire team members, FTLs, fire team leaders, and SLs, squad leaders. So those are qualifications that you can get, and the minimum is FTM. So you're going to be working towards that qualification. At the same time, you're also working towards just your general PSU knowledge. And so they have a packet of information, and it's just general stuff, right? History of a PSU, when the PSUs are created, where they all are, to include name and location of them, and anything and everything basically that you would need to want to know about that, what the mission set is, what the goals are, all that stuff. And so
Right.
that information you will also go through as you're learning as a non-specialized ME. So that's what you're going to be doing at a PSU. You're going to be training. You're going to be getting in with your fire teams. You'll probably be assigned to one. You also have your seconds or your first classes that will be in charge of you, basically telling you, hey, this is what you need to do. Being at a PSU also means that as anybody else that is not in what they call the green guard, which is PSU, and the blue guard, which is UNI.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in the green guard, you're authorized 12 more drills throughout the year, right? UNI are authorized 48. That means a Saturday and a Sunday for 12 months out of the year. For the PSU people, they're authorized one more drill. So that's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so the reason is because there's so much training to be done and so much to get done on that drill weekend. As I learned, and I'm sure it's probably the same anywhere, but it's definitely very much echoed throughout the PSU community, is you're drinking from a fire hose, because a lot of information coming at you really quick, really fast in a short amount of time.
Right.
For anybody coming in, whether it's ME or not, and I'm sure you probably echo the same sentiment, is just take it as it comes, right? Don't feel overwhelmed. Don't get anxious. Don't anything like that. Just breathe. Yeah. It's going to be fine. You will learn everything. There are some places that have timetables, but those are realistic timetables, and they're set for a reason because of obviously past things, right? So it works, right? It's tried and true methods that have been tested. So people coming into a PSU, don't worry about it. You're going to learn everything. There's a lot of opportunities to go to different schools and stuff. So that's what you would do as a non-specialized ME. And the PSU side. On the Blue Guard side, for me, and like yourself at a sector or an MSO or any of these other places, what you would do is something similar, but we're not training for a deployment. What we train for is to actually do law enforcement, what our ME rate is about. So what that would entail, again, is going to ranges, qualifying on weapon systems, learning what the two qualifications, the minimum, if you will, are to be able to attain as an ME. BTM, boarding team member, and a BO, a boarding officer. There are also a lot of other facets with that, LEI, FAI, stuff of that nature. Those are other qualifications that you can get that just enhance one of those two, BTM or BO. But that's what you would be doing. And you're, again, only there on 2 days, a Saturday and a Sunday. Let's not forget, though, that outside of those, Chris, as you know, we have our all hands, right? Those happen every 6 months or every year. So ours, for me, at least in San Diego, are April and October. And so that just means that's a weekend that's kind of, it's taken away from you to be able to train and stuff, because it's mostly an administrative weekend. As you know, we got
wash.
Yeah, it's a wash. So it's like, okay, we don't get that one, but this is what we'll do on others. So like for me, last month in February, I was back at my sector and it was range weekend. And so we go in and we qualified on weapon systems. We got GMT done right on the computer and other stuff like that. So that was what my weekend was. And those that aren't qualified, aka non-specialized MEs, they got to go to the range, qualify. Luckily, that for them at that time was a perfect moment for them to get something that if they had showed up to the unit or joined the Coast Guard and got to Sector San Diego after last month, like let's say this month or April, then they'd have to wait until 6 months from February to be able to get to the range again. So does that mean that that makes any of their other training after they got in less important? No, but you would be waiting for that one thing, which is to get a weapons qual to then get certified to be a more specialized ME, if you will. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. What again, some of these questions kind of segue into each other in a sense. What are the opportunities for ME reserves at a sector? You kind of touched on that a little bit already.
Yeah. So the opportunities for MEs at a sector are obviously being in a sector boarding team, right? That would be where you would be put more likely than not. But are there MEs at other places at sectors? Absolutely. Small boat stations for sure. And that's just because that's where they went. Maybe they were a BM, a bosun's mate at first, and then they transitioned to ME while they were there. And they just, based on, as you know, what we call it, our RPALs and all that other stuff, could dive into that later, but they are still there, right? They're authorized to be there. They hold a billet or a placeholder, if you will, at that particular unit, and they could do those things. I would say that, and I can't speak for every sector. Obviously, there's a lot throughout the continental U.S., but for the ones that I've been to at Sector Boarding Team in SF and here in San Diego, they really, your only spot, if you will, is being at Sector Boarding Team. And now I realize I took the word opportunity as places that you would be put at a sector. But opportunity, right. I would think I'd be remiss in not saying that, like the other one that you talked about a PSU and being not authorized ADOS there. So other opportunities for an ME at a sector could be, especially those other ADOS opportunities, like I briefly spoke about the Delta Blitz, and then up on the Great Lakes. There's tons of other things, right? And that's all falls into the mobilization resume in direct access. Log in there, take a look, see what it is. It will ask you, one of the questions is, it's a drop down. It'll ask you like business type, and it just means what your rate is. And you click on ME like you would for MST, and then you just hit search, and it'll pop up every opportunity for an ME throughout the Coast Guard mission set in the continental U.S. and where things are, right? You could always pick up orders to do this, pick up orders to do that. So there's a lot of opportunities as an ME reservist at a sector outside of your actual sector itself. Yeah, but I think if I answer the question correctly based on what that person was seeking in terms of an answer, the opportunity in terms of location would really only be at a VBST or a sector boarding team.
Okay. And that's also good information. You know, what Mike just said about mobilization and DA, not just for MEs, but anybody who's trying to be a quote unquote career reservist, which is where people want to join the reserves and basically be on perpetual active duty, but not necessarily committed to a 3 or 4 year station or enlistment. And that's exactly what you just described is great for. People can go in, and whatever their rating is, they can search based on their rating and rank, and they can even filter it down to location. And I've noticed that there's, for MST at least, there's always a pretty good amount of opportunities out there. It's just, do you want to go to Texas, or do you want to go to sector, Long Island or whatever? You have to be willing to move around, but there are usually opportunities like that. So that's a good good thing to keep in mind for people when they join is that mobilization tab in direct access, which hopefully you'll have a good LPO or chief when you get in who can show you how to use that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. All right. Okay, so the last question I have is kind of a good segue into there's a couple of live questions we've got here. So
Okay.
the question here is, can MEs drive boats or get qualified as a coxswain? I'm going to think the answer is yes, based on what you said just a few minutes ago. Is that right?
Yeah. So
Okay.
again, I don't know many MEs that are stationed at small boat stations. My assumption again is that they were probably prior BMs that decided they wanted to lateral into ME and they liked it, and they said they were fortunate enough to stay there. I say yes to be able to be a coxswain, and that's back to the PSU side of the house. I've got a lot of good friends that were MEs, and so in the PSU, as I said, right, you're typically going to get put in the shoreside security division. And then there's the waterside security division. Those are the two biggest divisions within a PSU. And so I've got a lot of good friends that are on the waterside security division just because the mission for that there is so great that people that had come, MEs that had come in, they at one point in time throughout the development of their career inside the PSU was, hey, we need someone because we didn't have enough people. And let's say at the time, Shoreside had enough people, or someone just volunteered and said, yes, I want to do it. So MEs at the PSU on a waterside division can definitely become a coxswain, or trying to think of some of the other, I won't say lesser qualifications, but there are other qualifications. Basic, right? You get basic and then you kind of move up from there.
Right.
And crew qual, that's one of them. So they started that way. And so I know, like I said, some friends that are at PSUs currently that are coxswain qualified.
Yeah.
Is that something that is more pushed towards a bosun's mate? Absolutely, because that's their realm. But it does not mean that, hey, if you have as you spoke about with me when I first joined, was just the openness and willing and, hey, this is fun, I love it, I want to do it, and stuff like that. That type of attitude will take people a long way in their military career, especially in the Coast Guard, volunteering and all that such. So if they wanted to do that, then that opportunity was afforded to them, and that's why they're in that position of being able to fulfill that particular thing. Like you said, becoming a cox and all that.
Right.
Will it, again, to temper expectations, is to say that that's, again, solely probably going to be focused towards BMs first. Get your crew qual, get things like that for sure as an ME. But could you attain the coxswain qualification? Sure. But that's, again, on a case-by-case basis, if you will, and working with your command and then people on the waterside division, chain of command to get you into those types of schools if there is availability to do so.
Right. Did you get your PR qual, by the way, pollution responder? I guess back in those days, it was still the PI, the pollution investigator. But
Correct.
did you get that qual with us?
No. So I got halfway through my PR and halfway through my FOSCR, because both of those were super, as you know, super hard to attain. A lot of CFRs to learn, Code of Federal Regulations and all that stuff, and then testing and sitting for a board. Like I said, I got through about half of those packets of signatures and sign-offs, and then I ended up, again, at that time, that was me finally getting into the last PSA school, thanks to Mr. Wasserman. And so at that point, I kind of just went to the wayside.
Right.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Commander Wasserman, he was the one that had the kayaks, right?
Yes.
I was trying to put a face to the name. Yeah, he was the one that would kayak across. He even was talking about potentially authorizing kayak-based harbor patrols in the Alameda area. Remember that?
Yes, I do. And he was the one. We had a team. What was it like? Not a team exercise, but a morale something or another at his house in Alameda. I remember that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember that. I think, yeah, I did. I went to that. You know, the funny thing too, you just mentioned the FOSCR, which is a very difficult, especially on the reserve side. I remember he was kind of a pragmatic about it. He was like, look, as reservists, I'm really just asking you to become FOSCR familiar, was the way he phrased it. You don't
Yeah,
necessarily have
because
to
of
get
how daunting it could be.
yeah. Because you have to spend, I mean, the reality is you have to spend weeks and weeks on active federal cases, which is just not always realistic. I mean, you have to be, you have to happen to be drilling when a federal case opens, and then
Mhm.
also you have to then opt to take orders really quickly for the next 2 or 3 weeks. You know, get like ADOS or something, because those go for weeks and weeks. They're not a weekend endeavor.
No,
So
absolutely not.
yeah, it's just not an easy thing to get.
Yeah.
Um, so you talked about PSU A school. So we'll jump to the first live question here.
Okay.
I don't know how easy this is for you to answer since you did at PSU A school, but
Mhm.
what is A school like for an ME? We'll get to the second part of the question after, but just what's A school like for an ME?
Okay. I will answer it as best as I feel that I can. So, if you remember, I mentioned that I know the current Rating Force Master Chief, Master
Mm-hmm.
Chief Ryan Patterson. I consider him a good friend, obviously a great mentor, someone for the ME rate. This is the person, right? He's active duty. He does everything and anything for an ME. People getting in, even trying to get into ME, people that are already MEs and trying to get schools. He's just the answer guy. So, what I mean by that is the way for an ME to be at A school now is going to FLETC, which is Charleston, South Carolina. And so you go there and you learn anything and everything, what it's like to become an ME. You basically come out as a qualified boarding officer. And the distinction that I'm making there is there's what we call qualification, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
certification.
Okay.
And Chris, as I'm sure you know, for MSTs, and maybe you guys use this, but for MEs especially, the qualifying and certifying are two very big distinctions because they mean something
Yeah.
different in TMT, the training management tool. And
Right.
that's just for the Coast Guard to say certain things about MEs and PSU folk MEs and all this other stuff, and even bosun's mate. That is a system that we utilize to ensure, handing down a piece of paper saying, Chris, I'm authorizing you as, an MST to be able to do these things. Well, if it's also in this system, that also gives the, we'll say, policy, legality, and all that stuff with it to reinforce that piece of paperwork, if you will. So right now, Charleston, South Carolina is kind of where it's at. That's where you would go.
Mm-hmm.
You learn all that stuff. Basic stuff to handcuffing, defending yourself from an attacker, your authority and your jurisdiction, the different laws that we are able to enforce as an ME on the international waters, on our border waters, on territorial seas, and all that other stuff, to then getting pepper sprayed and what it's like to get pepper sprayed, but then also to be able to render aid. So the reason that people get pepper sprayed is you need to be able to know what it's like for if you were to utilize that on a suspect and then
Right.
be able to render aid to them, right? So there's those things. But what I bring up with Master Chief Patterson is that I believe the transition might be going to we'll say a dual mode, if you will. So new coming MEs, as I believe it's being worked on right now, is they're going to go to Charleston, South Carolina for 5 weeks and learn what it's like to be a Blue Guard ME. And then the other part of that is to go to basically EOC. It's called Expeditionary Operators Course, and that's PSU centric. The idea is that at some point in time, for new MEs coming in, either by their own choice or by the Coast Guard's choice, you're going to probably end up at a PSU at some point in time. So what that means for those new MEs and all that stuff is you're going to learn the Blue Guard stuff for 5 weeks. You're going to go to EOC at SMTC in Charleston, South Carolina, or in North Carolina at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and you're
Mhm.
going to be there and learn PSU centric stuff. Because let's say you are a new ME, you come in, you go to a Blue Guard unit, and you're good to go. And all of a sudden you have this Green Guard knowledge, right? Because you went to EOC at SMTC. Well, what's going to happen is that if you somehow down the line in your career go to a PSU, you'll already have had the basic fundamentals of what it's like to be at a PSU. Because at some point, if you never touched a PSU and you never did that, you were going to get sent to EOC at some point in time, Expeditionary Operators Course. And from there, the idea is just to bridge those worlds so you don't have to go and be sent back. That's being fiscally responsible of the Coast Guard, saying, all right, we don't have to re-spend money to send you out here to do this training and all that stuff.
Right.
And it goes on to other things. So that's what A school's like. It's you've graduated from boot camp, you're in A school. I probably also kind of liken it to maybe joining college for the first time, like at AC, right, a junior college or something. So you're not being yelled at constantly like you were in boot camp. You're not having to do a ton of push-ups or sit-ups or anything of that nature. Will you have physical activities that you got to do? Absolutely. Will you be learning DT, defensive tactics, and doing red man fighting in a suit, which is physically taxing all that? Absolutely. But it's more like college. You're learning classes, you're learning your authority, your A&J, authority and jurisdiction, what you can and cannot do, the different laws that we're supposed to uphold, all that stuff. So,
sure. Awesome. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go to the next question, which is it's basically a more fleshed out version of the same question here. So they're saying, do MEs have to get qualified to be a boarding team member similar to BM or MK before being allowed to do boardings, or are they automatically qualified after A school?
So once MEs come out of A school currently, you are a qualified boarding officer, not BTM.
Okay.
Because the knowledge and everything that you're being trained at that schoolhouse is at a boarding officer level. So even though you're qualified, meaning that you've had a packet of information that has got everything on here saying you've met all these taskings and all this listing and all that stuff, that just again means you're qualified. You can't go out and start conducting searches and seizures and all those other things because you have to get certified. What that means is you got to be able to sit in front of a panel for an LEQB, a law enforcement qualification board, made up of individuals that have already been certified at whatever level that you're going to be testing for. Meaning if you're going for boarding team member, you've got people that have been boarding team members for a long time. They've been certified, they've been doing the job, all that. Same thing for BO. So you won't be able to automatically start going out and doing the work until you've gone through that stuff. And that also includes some other things. At MEA school, will you shoot and get qualified on the weapon systems? Absolutely. That's one of the things that goes into you being able to become certified and able to go out and then conduct law enforcement authority and all that other stuff at whatever home unit that you end up going to. But I would say it is similar to BMs, bosun's mates, and machinery technicians being able to do this stuff, right? So for bosun's mates, again, their primary job, though, is to be going out and driving boats, becoming coxswains, tack coxswain, crew, all the other stuff. It's a collateral job that they are doing to become a boarding team member or a boarding officer. It does work because they're already out on the water anyways. And so as a collateral, why not? And be able to do that as one and the same. But I would say that, yeah, I mean, it's similar to that, but it's different jobs, right? BMs are focused in the water world and driving the boats. And then that's where they would take us MEs on there to be able to conduct the law enforcement mission. But does it mean that a BM can't be having an ME certification like BO or BTM? Of course not. That's how it's currently working in the Coast Guard. Same as machinery technician, right? You'd be EOW, right? Being an engineer underway. and you can do all that stuff, but can you hold an ME certification? Of course you can. It's just you got to go through the training, get pepper sprayed, learn about, handcuffing and all that other stuff. So,
right. Yeah, I've definitely found in my Coast Guard career that the opportunities are absolutely there to broaden your training, even if it's potentially something that's out of rate, with obviously the contingency that you have to have the things taken care of for your unit, for your rating and responsibilities first and foremost. And that's where you get a lot of people who, like, if you remember Obermeyer, I mean, he was a prime example of somebody who was just, he was one of the folks that joined closer to 40, and he was kind of already a well-established professional, and he was just going out of his way to, drill for points and do all these extra things and get qualified. And nobody's going to stop you if you have that ambition.
Yeah.
But you do have to be able to prioritize. And he was Mr. Coast Guard, as I recall people calling him.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. He was definitely all about it.
Absolutely. And that's a thing that I think I say a lot on this channel. People ask a lot of questions about, can I do this and that? Can I? And a lot of times it's like, well, can you? I mean, you're the one to answer that. You're limited by your own sense of what you can do. So, I think that's a good point, that there's a lot of opportunities in the Coast Guard and in life, if you have ambition for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. They don't have any new questions in the live chat currently.
Okay.
What about, so you were the final class, you were in the final PSA school class, which I didn't know. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So how did that prepare you for your first, well, obviously not Sector San Francisco specifically, you did that. Yeah. You did A school after Sector San Fran. So yeah. So how did that prepare you for your first role in the Coast Guard post A school, having done PSA school? And did you have to do any kind of just in time training, as it were, to kind of get up to speed with the ME side?
Yeah, just like that last question, talking about MEs, and is it the same as bosun's mates and machinery technicians to be able to do, I won't say ME specific, but ME qualifications. Right. And yeah, I mean, for PS, all that was very PSU centric, right? You learn about your fence lines and how tall a fence needs to be with the top guard, and bushes and greenery next to it. Like how close can they be and how far away, and sentries and all the stuff that you would normally, well, for those that don't know about PS anymore, so I'd say normal, it's very Army Marine Corps style, right? You're going on ruck marches, and that's kind of what PSUs are kind of like, and they mirror to a certain respect. Infantry style stuff. So coming after A school and coming to Sector San Francisco and doing sector boarding team, I didn't have to really do any just-in-time training in sense of, was there something new about ME? No, it was just about doing the qualification. I started from the ground and worked the way up. BTM, boarding officer. Again, there's other certifications that go into that, right? I mentioned LEI, law enforcement instructor, FAI, firearms instructor. There was another qualification within boarding officer called BOCA, boarding officer certified ashore, just meaning similar, not obviously the same, but similar to what we did in terms of harbor patrols. So I remember going out with BO and another BTM, and we went to the Chevron plant over in San Francisco. And one of those things, the nice thing about boarding officer certified ashore is some of that authority extends to the maritime domain and what those facilities are. They're obviously maritime adjacent, it's on the water and all that stuff. So they've got a fence line. And so there's certain authorities and jurisdiction that we as the Coast Guard have to be able to go onto those types of facilities and be able to look and see, is everything secure, right? We're always looking at it, I would say, from the lens of wanting to ensure that the homeland is safe, our facilities are safe from potential terrorist threats or activities. And so, as such, we would drive around the fence line and ensure that you weren't missing anything, any barbed wire or concertina wire. You weren't having holes in fences. We check out the physical security plan that they had, make sure that they were running their quarterly or annual drills and stuff like that to ensure that, hey, if something were to go on, this is what they needed to do, right? And they had something set in place.
Right.
So all those things that I did just naturally, I would say, when coming to sector boarding team, was I just worked my way from the ground up and had a lot of good people above me, now that are chiefs, senior chiefs, master chiefs. They're probably officers as well that were guiding me along the way. And so it was very helpful, especially as you said, like with Obermeyer, where if you as an individual have that within you and you want to come in on your own time, you want to drill for points towards like retirement, you want to do this and that, and you have that drive within you, that initiative, for the most part, I'd say, yeah, the Coast Guard's not going to dampen that and tell you no. Really, I think the only reason that they probably would tell you no is, in terms of especially pay, is because of financial reasons, right? Maybe there's just not enough drills to pay you or whatever the case may be. But drilling for points on your own time, if this is something you're taking on, then I don't think the Coast Guard, in my opinion, has ever hampered that by anybody. And, that was the same thing, kind of like me. I would come in, and because guys had seen that, and I got in really good with the active duty side, and they saw someone that was eager and willing to learn and trying to pick up stuff and all that stuff, they took that really well, because, as you know, active duty folk are busy doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. We as reservists are only there in terms of in case something happens, break glass, right? That's what we are meant to train as a reserve component to, in the eventuality that you do need us, right? That's what anyone listening right now is. We're big on metrics. Any civilian career may call it something else, but I think it equates to the same, just meaning, how ready are you to be able to fulfill the shoes of somebody else? So for us, our metrics look like, for the most part, dental and all that other stuff. Do you have a travel card? Are you medically cleared to include dental and stuff? And do you have all your mandated training, meaning online training that you got to do, like school, all done? If you got those kind of 5 things and you're basically green, you're good to go, then that's all that matters. And for us, that's just what being a reservist is. You're there for the eventual case that we need to be utilized.
Yeah. And that, and I remember, I think it was around the time of COVID when they kind of rolled out that parental leave opportunity. And I was able to take advantage of that during that first summer of COVID, where I was able to go work at prevention for a little while. Nice. And it's a great opportunity for, obviously it gives Coast Guard active duty parents a chance to bond with their new child. And it gives people like us a chance to kind of brush up on our skills and help support them in their mission.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought this was a good comment here. So the amazing Spider-Man says, I'm almost done MEA school right now. I have 3 weeks left. It's been a great experience. I will be going to EOC right after. I'm at PSU 309.
There you go. So, nice. That's good. And yeah, I mean, the amazing Spider-Man 309 is a great location. I've got some good friends that are stationed there right now. So I know that you are probably experiencing a whole lot of things. Obviously, keep it up, man. It's great to see that you're almost 3 weeks left and you'll be going to EOC right after that. I don't know if you were a part of currently what they're calling the XRAP course. So that's, Chris, if you remember the question you asked about, I think it had to do with MEs and then what's it like at A school and all that other stuff. And I kind of dived into a little bit about it. So XRAP was that new thing that I was mentioning about the Rating Force Master Chief, and his vision for it was to split the A school. So that way, if someone new coming in, like the Amazing Spider-Man, you would go to MEA school in South Carolina, and then you would go to SMTC in North Carolina for the other 5 weeks, a total of 10. So it gave you both sides of the houses. So that way you didn't have to, again, have to go right after. So I don't know if you're part of that X-Rap course, Spider-Man, but if you're not, that's great. I'm glad you're going to be going to EOC. That is a fun experience. It'll definitely be something, since you're already at PSU 309. That's what I'm assuming. I don't know if that means that you're going to be going there after the fact and you were Blue Guard before. I don't think you were. So anyways, going to EOC at SMTC is a lot of fun. It's definitely another set of training that's not like the ME side. Again, you'll be doing, patrolling. You'll be doing some live fire with simunitions. You'll be learning about combat lifesaver and all that stuff. So, you're in the regular 10 week. Okay. SSOC. Nice. So SSOC, for those that don't know, is another thing that is very just shoreside centric. The EOC Expeditionary Operators course is, again, the basic intro to PSU life. So it doesn't matter what you are at a PSU, a YN, an SK, an ME, an HS, everyone goes to EOC, even the officers. So SSOC is the shoreside operators course, and that's specifically just for shoreside. And it's an additional 2 weeks given to just those shoreside members to even enhance or hone their skills even finer. So if you're an FTM right now at a PSU, or an FTL, and you want to get to squad leader, or you just want to kind of work a little more on a little more stuff, land navigation, whatever that may be, patrolling techniques, all that stuff, then you go to SSOC for that specific purpose. So Spider-Man, I hope you have fun, dude. Those are going to be some great moments that you'll definitely look back on your career.
So there's another question by Chris Gaffney I'm going to put up in just a second. Sure. But first, I want to follow up on PSUs, because I did want to ask this question. I've had brief experience as I considered myself an honorary PSU member for a short time, because when I was down at Sector LALB, I got to know some of the chiefs down there, and that was actually my first new unit after making chief. And so I kind of got in with the chief's mess there, and because myself and the Silver Badge Senior Chief Denham got together, and I'm trying to make sure I didn't get. I sometimes get my names mixed up. Anyway, the Silver Badge Senior Chief down there and we did a van pool for them for their Christmas party. Okay. So in return, we kind of got to hang out and have food and party with them. So I kind of consider myself like an honorary PSU member. But anyway, just the point I was going to make is that they were very welcoming. They were very friendly to me. There was not any of this oh, you're Blue Guard, you're not one of us. They were very welcoming to me, and I got to kind of just hang out with them at their holiday party and just be one of the team. And after that, I kind of got to know them, and so that I kind of would hang out with them and have dinner and stuff. So that's my lead into the question of just what is life like at a PSU? How is is my experience there indicative of a normal experience, or was that just a fluke?
No, I would say it's not a fluke. I'd say the PSUs are very family, right? Very centric. And I shouldn't say it's not like any other unit, right? Chris, I'm not exactly sure which unit you're currently at the moment, but even at sector boarding team right now for myself in San Diego, I consider that also very family. It's just not as big. PSUs right now are the largest contingent of reservists in the Coast Guard, right? As you know, you and I both know, there's only so many reservists in the Coast Guard, right? 5,000 max currently, I guess. Mm-hmm. And as such, the PSUs hold the majority of them, and there's 8 of them. So you're bound to get this kind of family lifestyle, right? You're working together, you're in the field together, you're going on deployments together, all that stuff. It's very family centric. And so what you experienced is definitely not a fluke. I would say all the PSUs, not having obviously been stationed at all of them, but having visited some and even knowing a lot of friends throughout the different PSUs, that's exactly what it's like. You bring people in. Hey, you do a nice for someone like you did, and at Silver Badge, they did a van pool for them on holiday, which was,
Yeah.
I'm sure they were super grateful and blessed. Of course, they're going to bring you in.
Right.
But that's what I'm saying. So I would think it's not any indicative of anything else like at any other unit. At Sector San Diego right now, I consider us a family as well. We're a close-knit, bonded group that we're all there for the same thing. And I'd say even just generally speaking, we're all Coast Guard.
Right.
So it just means that we look out for each other. We're family, even though we don't know each other. We don't drill with each other. We're not probably in even the same circle or anything like that, right? We're not the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but by some relation, because we wear the same uniform, that's just what that is. And we always look out for each other.
Right. Yeah, I think even to the next level of that is that we're all the same team in terms of all the military branches, and I think that, obviously I think that it's some friendly banter between the branches is fine, but I also I'm weary of people getting a little too overly, oh, my boot camp's tougher than yours, we're harder for the Guard than you guys are. Like I feel like I'm all about support, mutual support, and making mutual connections, which is kind of what this channel is supposed to be all about. So I'm glad that you kind of feel the same way.
Absolutely, because in your experience and in mine, you haven't gone through Chiefs Academy just like myself. There's, again, speaking to opportunities of questions past, for when you move up, especially in the enlisted or even the officer rank, there's opportunities to meet people from all branches of service and even outside, right? I can't speak to you, but for me, I've met people from the Chinese military, the Australian military, the Germans, the French, the Canadian, you name it, right? And so even being able to work with them and all that stuff and speak basically to a same or similar level, we all have the same mindset. We're all family. We look out for each other, even if we didn't know each other. So,
yeah. When I went through MSTA school, I remember there was an international officers course going on the same floor in Yorktown where I was. And so I would see them every day coming in and out. And, it was, I was brand new to the Coast Guard at the time, 20 years old, but it was cool seeing them and just seeing like these services from different countries represented. And, even on that level, like as an existential humanist level, like we're all on the same team. We're all humans, we need to take care of each other and support each other. And I won't get into any further than that, because it's unfortunate when saying something like that could be considered a political statement, because it's not. But anyway, let's see here. So Chris is getting a lot of questions in. There's not a lot of questions coming in, so we're going to get to Chris's question again here. So are MEs limited to just law enforcement missions, or do they partake in SARS at all, even if it's just because they get diverted?
It's a good question, Chris. So I would have to say that, so if you're an ME and you're on the, again, blue side of the house, right? Sector boarding team like myself doing the actual law enforcement mission. If you're not attached to a small boat unit or a small boat station, you're probably not getting underway to go partake in SAR. So what I mean by that is, for Sector San Francisco, where I was, the station and sector were obviously at the same physical geographic location. So if we needed to go out and do something to, let's say, we needed them to be able to take us to do our mission, which was boarding one of the big tanker ships coming in to offload cargo and stuff, and a SAR case popped off, well, that's first and foremost. So we would go and divert and go do that. So to answer your question, yes, right, to that extent. But for the most part, no. If you're Sector San Diego right now, sector boarding team, we go out and we do things, again, as I had mentioned before, with joint operations. So we'll go with AMO. air marine operations. And so they have their own boat. And if they go on, they're not obviously Coast Guard at all. This is CBP. This is another agency within DHS, and they go and do their thing. Their thing is strictly law enforcement. So if we're underway with them, then obviously we're going to go do whatever our mission is. And I guess same respect would be if we were Coast Guard still. If we needed to be able to use our Coast Guard station asset to take us out to be able to do something, the same situation would apply. If a SAR case popped off, that's first and foremost mission that's going to answer first. We go divert and do that, and then get other assets to do the law enforcement thing because we had to branch off and go do it. But for the most part, I would say it would depend on the sector and station that you're at. Like for us at Sector San Francisco, when I was there, we could always rely on other avenues in terms of other resources to be able to get us to do our mission other than the station boats. So then that's what we would do.
Right.
But if those assets weren't available, then obviously we would use the station one, which again precluded that if something popped off, we would go do that. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about broadly speaking in terms of your Coast Guard career, how you've liked life as a reservist, as an ME?
Yeah. I mean, Coast Guard life, again, as just a general reservist is exciting. It's something that if people, I'd say, you don't know what you don't know. I've kind of learned that term the last few years, and I think it's a great way to explain a lot of things. And when you either join up in the military, right, never having been it before, whether you even had family or friends that were in the military prior, regardless of being Coast Guard or not, you don't know what you don't know. And so coming into it, my career has been littered with all kinds of things that I never expected I would have had the chance or opportunity to take. I'd say much like yourself, Chris. So case in point, 2010, I went to Deepwater Horizon. Everyone was there. I totally get it, right? But that was a great opportunity to get introduced to a lot of things. For those watching or listening, again, it's the same thing as the mobilization resume. So ICS, right, Incident Command System or structure, however you want to call it, is that thing within the federal government that if some sort of natural disaster or man-made disaster pops off in the continental U.S., people that have gone through that training, regardless of what agency you are from, you will have those chances and opportunities to pick up those things and say, hey, I want to go do that because I've had this type of training, or I think this would be something great to help me further my career down the line, regardless of what Coast Guard rate you are. BM, ME, MST, ET, EM, AST, OS, CS, right? Doesn't matter what you are. So 2010, I got to do that. And then in 2011, 2012, I got to go to Afghanistan, part of the RAID team. So the Redeployment Assistance Inspection Detachment team. What crazy thing about that is as we talk about small sets and smaller sets and so on and so forth, right. I was a part of a 400-ish group in the Coast Guard that got to do that mission. And so when you think about how small the Coast Guard is, and then you look at how small active duty is to then how small reservists are, then that team shrinks really, really small. And so it's cool being a part of something like that, a history of the Coast Guard, just like, Chris, you're part of history, generally speaking, same as I am, but stuff that you've done in your career. And then, not too long ago, back in October to December last year, I was in Charleston, South Carolina again for not ME related at all. It was all ICS stuff. FEMA requested forces and said, hey, we need assistance for the hurricane response and relief from Helene and Milton. And they put out a thing. I volunteered and off I went, right? And I was able to help out, but that had nothing to do with ME. That was all the ICS qualifications. Right. So that was cool. And then, again, just other opportunities that pop up throughout the Coast Guard.
Yeah, that's awesome. We have another comment here from Medicine, leaving for A school in 12 to 15 months. Long wait. I know I just did a wait list video a month ago about an MEA school it's like a 12 to 15 month wait.
Yeah, I know it's as Chris mentioned at the beginning of this video stream, is that it's a coveted thing, right? And I'm not saying it's still the new and shiny, but I mean there are newer rates out there, right? We have our cybersecurity specialists,
Yes.
right? That's a new one that's out. Our TA talent acquisition is out.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the ME for those that whatever it is, right? You have family that's LE. You just like what the mission set speaks to you as for what an ME could be for coming into the Coast Guard. It's still that new and shiny, and people want to do it. So I get, 12 to 15. Don't get discouraged by any means. You're going to get there, but as I was mentioning, I feel that with speaking to the RFMC, and I know who the next one is to take over. When the current RFMC does leave that position, that I think XRAP is going to be that way forward now for MEs. And XRAP, again, is just that amalgamation of what MEA school was, which is 5 weeks Blue Guard, and then the next is 5 weeks Green Guard. And so you're just mashing both worlds together, and that way it just gets people at a baseline level prepared for their Coast Guard career as an ME. Because either way, if you got out of boot camp, you already knew what unit you were going to go to. And let's say you immediately got into A school, or you waited 12 to 15 months to get to A school, you know that you're going to go that route anyways, right? So if you got out of boot camp, went to a Blue Guard, you're like, cool, well, I'm going to get blue and green, right, 12 to 15 down the line. Or you went green, and you're like, I'm going to get blue and green 12 to 15 down the line, whatever it is. And you're just in two different places.
Right.
But yeah, it's exciting. I don't want people to get discouraged, like, oh man, I got to wait so long. I think the flip side of that is that's just encouraging. There's so many people that want to join and want to be a part of that, or any other rate for that matter.
Right.
It's just great to see that, okay, hey, there's so much about that people just want to be able to come in and do something. So
right. Yeah, I'm in the when you talk about like niche, I'm in a very small niche now in my unit. You kind of mentioned earlier where I'm at right now. I always think it's funny when I say where I'm at, because I'm at the IMAT. I'm at the reserve IMAT, Incident Management Assist Team, over Coast Guard Island. Actually, back to my roots, back where I first reported in some 20 plus years ago. But I liken it to a very modified version of a PSU, just in the sense that we are kind of, because the thing with the PSU that's interesting to me is you guys really kind of run your own admin, right? You have your own admin team, and your HS is kind of, everything is all within. And that's kind of in a light version how we are at the IMAT, where we have our own little office and admin, and we don't do the 36 drills per year, but we do. A lot of us come in Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and so we can kind of get up to speed with the active duty team. But anyway, why it's interesting to me is it's the first time in my career that I've been at a unit that's not rating specific. I'm the only, well, actually, we just got another MSTC there, but up until then, I was the only MST. It's all different rates, and it's not rating specific, and it's only chiefs and officers. So it's kind of like, it's weird being like the lowest ranked member as a chief. But it's an interesting experience.
Yeah, and I've heard great things about IMATs. I've seen the solicitations in DA for it. I will say, if I would be lying if I said I hadn't looked at those to see if oh man, maybe they might need an ME or something.
Oh yeah. It's very ICS. You mentioned ICS earlier. Like, it's very ICS. I mean, that's what we do. We train and qualify in ICS so we can train others, and then also potentially we can deploy if needed as well for
Right.
real world things.
Yeah.
So let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Maybe we'll wrap this up with this last question. This is
Okay.
this is just a question that's coming to me right now. And then maybe we'll kind of wrap it up with this one. What drove you to because I think everybody's interested in why people want to join the Coast Guard, especially a lot of people that are watching this are thinking about joining the Coast Guard. So what made you decide to join the Coast Guard? Okay, I'm going to ask you a 3-part question here.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, this is not, I can write it down and put it on screen if you need me to. It's going to be a 3-parter. What made you join the Coast Guard? What made you decide to go PS/ME specifically? And why did you stay? Why did you not get out after your first enlistment?
Yeah. So what drove me to the Coast Guard, first question, was I feel some people that either watching or listening may be able to resonate with this. I was school and work. And I think for a lot of people, that just gets boring. The monotony of doing the same thing over and over and over again. And my uncle at the time he was a civil engineer with the city of Huntington Beach. And so they had an LCAC, one of those inflatables the Navy did, right? Came up to Huntington Beach, and there was, weirdly enough, Coast Guard and Navy there at the same time. So I thought, oh, that's cool. Put on a little demonstration. And I was like, all right. I went over, introduced, he knew some people in that EMS law enforcement community. And so I didn't kind of give it another thought. I moved up to Sacramento, California for school in 2006. And then from there, I was doing the work in school, and I contacted my uncle and I said, hey man, can you get me in touch with that person you put me in touch with? And so that's where my story began. And we kind of just did that whole process, which leads into that second question that you asked me about being a PSME. So again, for anyone that is interested or thinking about military or anything like that, right? It doesn't matter what it is. I think as Chris said, not necessarily said, he alluded to a certain respect, right? We're all one service. We're all different services. We're all humans, right? As you get bigger on that broader scale. Mm-hmm. But bringing it back down to just us specifically, as in the military services, whether you go Air Force, Marine, Army, Navy, Coast Guard, doesn't matter, right? Space Force, you're going to get to a recruiter, and what they're going to do is they're going to show you a list of either MOSs, right? Military Occupational Specialty for DoD branch, and then us, right? Our rating, that and Navy. So they're going to show you a list of the different jobs that that are available, not based off of score yet, right? Because you haven't taken the ASVAB, but based off of just what's available. And so when I saw it at the time when PS was out, it just sounded super cool. I wish I had saved that paper, because the description of it just said, all this stuff, and it sounded really cool to me. So I said, you know what, this is what I wanted to do. And again, I took the test. I didn't score the score needed for it, but thankfully at the time there was the waiver. I put in for it, a 3-point waiver. I got it. They accepted it, and then that's where it went off. And being PS again and learning that, and I still actually have my binder from PSA school of all that stuff, all the knowledge and everything that we had that's probably long since archived in the Coast Guard, not library, but our
home port or whatever.
Yeah. Our area. And so all that was just really cool. And now ME is just what it is. It's law enforcement, and it's not really any different from PS, right? I'd say PS was not an amalgamation, but it was a lot of things. PS, I remember, was kind of like BM, right? You could do some boat driving there because that's what they expected, even though boats had been around for a long time. And then kind of MST work, because the PSs would do harbor patrols and walking the shoreline between lighthouses and stuff back in the day. And so that was also kind of a thing. So PS rate was actually a lot of other rates in one. even though they were still specifically segmented to what they were doing. Like MST was still MST,
Right.
but that's when our highest in the land at the time, our commandant, decided, I want just an LE focused. And so they did away with PS and said, cool, ME is going to be it. And yeah, I mean, I've loved it ever since. And so to your last question, which was, why not get out after my first tour? People usually always say, oh, you get to, why not get to your 10? And when you're at the hump, why not just stay, right? You're already halfway through. So clearly I wasn't halfway through. My first tour, as anybody will know or get to know, as a reservist, you sign up for 8, right? It's 6 years with an optional 2 at the end. Because at your 6th year, what's going to happen is the Coast Guard, someone within the Coast Guard, i.e. your chief, like Chris, or someone should come to you and say, hey, so-and-so, Seaman Gaffney or whoever, or Spider-Man, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay in? Do you want to stay in as a reservist? Do you want to integrate into active duty? Do you want to go IRR, individual ready reserve? And I can't remember what this one meant, but ISL, like another one.
And like standby, right? Like something like individual standby leave or something like that.
Something like that. And so you have those options afforded to you, right? And it says, okay, this is what you get to do. And so for me, I enjoyed my 6 years at the time, and I said, I don't know, why not? Let's just keep going. So I re-signed for another contract, a full 8, got me to my 14, and then, what be 3 years ago come this June, they said, hey, what do you want to do again? I was like, sign me up for another 8. Why not? I'm already over halfway. And so, it's going to put me obviously well past my 20, but I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. And I think for a lot of people, it's not, it could be a multitude of things, right? The extra money, the benefits that come with it, right? Education, medical, all that other stuff. Then we'll just say freedom. Maybe there's certain freedoms that you get because of the extra money or something like that. Or the freedom is that you leave your civilian job for one weekend, even though you're technically working and you're not, it's not off time, right? But it's just a freedom of, I get to go do something else. Like my mind is so focused on this thing, I get to do something else and completely kind of decompress, if you will. But I will say for a lot of people, there's a lot of different motivators for joining military, but I feel this one was best summarized. I'm trying to remember who it was in my Coast Guard career, but they had said it's the only full-time job, or it's the only part-time job in the world with full-time benefits. So when you join the military and you join being a reservist, it's a part-time gig. You only do it 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out of the year, but you get the full-time benefits. The medical is great. You know, if you're single, it's like $50 or something like that for medical. If you're married, then it jumps up to 200 plus, but that includes you, your spouse, and then I believe like 2 to 4 additional kids for that amount of money. It's crazy. Then of course the education benefit, then the VA benefit, then all this other stuff that, most people just don't know about, but it does afford you a lot of things. And then again, like yourself, you got to go to a lot of places that you probably normally wouldn't have if you hadn't joined the military. You hadn't had a career that had money to be able to get you to those places. Like for myself, I never would have went to Australia for the first time if I hadn't gone into the military, went with the raid team, got picked up for that. So I got to go to Afghanistan, Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, and then got to go to Australia, and then Australia a second time with the PSU, and traveling around the US and doing all that stuff. So it's been fantastic. I don't see why stop now.
Yeah, I definitely think, to your point about getting to go places, one of the testaments to just how well done I think the Coast Guard is the Coast Guard Reserve in terms of how we train. I've gone on a good amount of deployments now and trained and cross-trained with, in some cases you're training with other active duty people. Sometimes you're training with people from other services. Like when I went to Medford for the COVID vaccine, we were working with FEMA, we were working with Navy and Air Force and even some Marines. And we all just fall in and train, and we all work together. And one of the most consistent feedback that I've gotten from deployments is that the people there that weren't Coast Guard didn't know that we were reserves. They just thought they can't tell the difference. We're interchangeable when we're on the scene.
Wow.
And I think that that's just a testament to, for one, the training that we give, but also the quality of the people that join us. And I think, I really believe that to a certain extent, our, what we lack in day-to-day Coast Guard, as you said, it's a part-time job, but what we lack there, we make up for in our real world experience, because it's not as if we just do a weekend and then we're just sitting around watching TV the rest of the month. We also actually happen to have lives, like working lives. I almost think of it like, like a superhero, like Superman. I'm not saying that we're superheroes, but just the idea that you almost live a double life in a way. There's this other side, like you mentioned, we go off on a week or a weekend away from work. They don't really know what we're doing, and we bring that to the table when we come into work, which I think is kind of an X factor that can help out.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a good conversation starter.
Oh, absolutely. And as you said, it's a testament not just to the individual joining this branch of service or any other branch of service, but being a reservist in general, right? There's Reserve Navy, Reserve Marine Corps,
right.
Even Reserve Army, and you can get into that National Guard or, all this other stuff, but
right.
That's just what it is. It's testament, like you said, to the people that join, and then also them themselves and what we have going on, and just our willingness to say, yeah, I'm willing to do this.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll have one more question here that Amazing Spider-Man snuck in with one more question. Okay. Do you like the blue side or the green side better? I would like to take blue side orders when I can.
Okay. Yeah. Spider-Man, you're 309. So, I think that's a tough question to answer. If you were just asking me specifically, I love both. If you ask, I've got lots of friends, and some of them, you ask them point blank, they say green. Absolutely, 100%. Can't stand the blue. If you ask the others, they say blue. Can't stand the green. Blue, 100%. So for me personally, I love both. I think that more is just about speaking to me and my personality and how I am as an individual. I find it's probably dumbing it down, so to speak, but I find, and I have found, the joy in both, right? It's two different things. And if your mind is able to shift between those two things, like when people go and they join a blue side first and going into the green, or same like you, Spider-Man, you're at 309 and you're going to be learning the blue side the first half, right? Or right now you're learning it. It's going to be like a foreign concept because you've been learning FTM, you've been learning about DFPs, defensive fighting positions, 240s, 50 cals, and now you're learning about A&J and territorial seas and contiguous zones and EEZs and all that other stuff. So it's a different mind shift. It's not saying that you've got to, dump some knowledge to be able to retain the other, but when you leave the green and you go into the blue, you actually get to see, instead of, as being at 309, you train for the eventual deployment, but you're never actually doing a job, if that makes sense. You're an ME at 309, but you're not actually doing law enforcement, right? Answer is obviously you're not, but you're not doing it. And so being there and doing something that is very Army, infantry, Marine Corps patrolling style stuff is really cool, because it's a different side of the house and it's necessary for why the PSUs are created. But when you go to the blue, then you actually get to put that stuff into practice. And I feel that's where, for me, like I said, I liken it to more my personality, but probably just also fulfillment. You're actually getting to do what you set out to do in the Coast Guard. I said I want to be ME, or I want to be MST. I want to protect the environment. I want to be able to hold people accountable for, spilling a Y valve on their fancy yacht and all that other stuff. I want to do those things. So for MEs, like I want to enact our law and all that stuff for protecting our homeland. Okay. And you do that as an ME at a sector or small boat station, MSO, a base, whatever it is, And so, yeah, to answer your question, for me, it's both. I love both. I don't pick one over the other. They each have their own individual qualities about them. So
I'm glad that you did decide to stay in, Mike. The Coast Guard needs people like you. And it was definitely, I wish that we could have worked together longer, but the time that we did have together was definitely, I really appreciated it. And I really liked that, kind of just to your point just now, like, I don't think you ever, there was never any time where like, no, I can't really do that. Like, Chris, I don't, I don't feel, it was always like, yeah, man, what do you need? You want to go to Bodega Bay and check out some Mystery Machine? Let's go, man. It was like, that was always how you were. And I can see that that's carried over with your career. And I think that people like working with you because of that. And I think that the Coast Guard needs people like you who care, who are compassionate and kind, but hardworking and ambitious. And I hope that you can stay as long as you're comfortable with it.
Well, absolutely, brother. And I appreciate it. I mean, same could be said for you. And I wish that, again, like you, we could have done a lot more. But I think like you had spoken about or touched on briefly is, as you said, right, we had a brief, and if people look at it holistically speaking, a brief moment, 13 months, right? We were in this window together. But look, over a 20-something year career and almost 17-year career, and we're still great friends that get together. We talk, we do stuff. And if you will, there's no actual time in between of we did this to kind of keep that continuity. It's because of that moment, that little, insular moment is what created all that stuff. And so for Spider-Man, Gaffney, anybody else watching or listening, that's where things are. Whether you join military or not, it's you join a company, you do something, you're going to have these things because this is just life. You're going to have these moments where you're going to come across people, you're going to make friends and lasting connections with them. And obviously up to those individuals to keep or disregard them and stuff like that. But for Chris and I, man, we've been good friends for the better part of all of our careers, and we'll continue to be such even after our long gone. So
yeah, and it's it's like I always like to say the Coast Guard, and especially the Coast Guard Reserve, just like I would say for my YouTube channel itself, it's not a small group, it's an exclusive group. And because of that, there's not a whole lot of us, but you tend to develop those strong relationships with people, and you tend to find, even if you don't necessarily work with them, you find each other, whether it be at a mutual training or, on social media or a YouTube channel or whatever it is. But, it's great. I think it's such a great organization, and we may not always agree with like the leadership positions from the top down, but I think where we are, the commoners, as you were, you and I, we just there to do our job, and we're doing the best we can, and we try to train the future of the Coast Guard. And okay, there's another question here, and I hate to leave questions
unanswered,
especially because like some of these questions for ME have been coming for like a year, and I'm just now I finally got you here. But we'll cut this. We'll say this is the last one, and if other ones come after, I'll send them to you in an email, and we can get some answers that way. Or we'll bring you back.
Absolutely.
We'll look at the ratings. We'll look at how the polls show. How did Mike play?
Yeah, I like it. Maybe they're commenting the shirt's terrible. Put on a sweatshirt that says Coast Guard. I could do
that. Okay, so this will be the final question. For a reservist, I know A school is guaranteed. So does that mean you go to A school right after boot camp? Can you choose to go after a couple months after boot camp? I think I've actually answered this question on the channel before, but you go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I like Chris said, he probably didn't answer it on the channel beforehand. I can't speak to everyone's experience. Like for me, A schools in a sense are guaranteed. You're not wrong, dominance, but I've seen where A schools were quote unquote guaranteed, but because of either funding or that there weren't enough people to be able to put the class together, right, to make it possible, then the class went away. Would you get into another one? Absolutely, right? So, but to answer your question about, for reservist A school being guaranteed and you go right after boot camp, that's all kind of dependent. Like for me, right? I They didn't know what to do with the PS when I met Chris at Sector IMD, and so for it took 13 months for me to get into the last PSA school. So my A school wasn't guaranteed in the sense I was guaranteed to go to PS, but not a specific date and time, maybe like what you're talking about. So could you go to A school right after boot camp? Absolutely. A lot of DoD services do the same thing, right? It's like bam, one right after another. I don't think typically, and Chris, you can tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe it happened in your experience. I I don't think Coast Guard typically has done that where you boot camp and then man straight into A school. I know some rates have, but I don't know about MST.
I did the RK split, it was called.
Ah,
So essentially, it's like you go one summer to boot camp, you do a year in college, and then the next summer you go to A
that's right.
school. But I remember there was at least one person who came directly from boot camp to A school, but she was the only one, and I don't think that was the norm. So I think, of course, this was 20 years ago, but I think it's something one of those things that can happen, but is not super common.
Yeah, and I'd
Yeah,
say the answer in the second part, can you choose to go? I think that's up to you and the recruiter. And again, Chris, you said you did the RK split. For me,
yeah,
I feel that there was a list of times that were available, if you will, and said, hey, it's probably going to be this time because the recruiters are going to know this information,
right.
or at least to a certain extent. And they're going to say, oh, yeah, we can get you into this class or, this or whatever we have them going on as however often we have classes going. So I think it would also depend on the rate that you decide to go to, right? So dominance, you're talking about reservists going to an A school guarantee. Which school would that be? BM, right? Maybe some of them could be in immediate right after boot camp. ETEM, OS, IVCS, even some of the ones that people don't know about. MU, musician, right? That's a rate.
Right.
And people forget about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so things like that as a reservist, it just would depend.
And I think that to that point too, that and I'll do every couple months I'll do a video where I talk about the current wait list times for A schools. I think that depending on whatever that wait list is also going to probably indicate how long you may, or how soon or not you can get to your A school.
Yeah, exactly.
But okay, well, we're down to one viewer right now, so that's a good time to split, I think.
I love it.
But yeah, I really appreciate it, Mike. I'm glad that you were able to come on here and help out with so many questions.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. I mean, anytime. Again, if more questions filter in or the ones that you've had from a year ago, you can send them to me. I'm more than happy to jump back on, man. It was great. Obviously, we got to connect again, and hopefully,
Yeah,
even though there's one viewer, hopefully the others that were on were able to gain something from this. And
yeah,
think for you and I, especially where we're at in our careers now, we just want to be able to help those people get in, further themselves, better themselves in whatever way that they want to. Not saying they have to get better in their own personal lives, but just something to get people to, take a look at other opportunities that they might not think are available to them. Oh, maybe military's not for me. Oh, maybe this isn't for me. Oh, maybe, these things. You don't know unless you don't ask.
absolutely. And asking questions is very important, and that's one of the things I like about. I've never been shunned away from like from asking questions and using your resources and making connections with people. So
absolutely,
it's big. Yep. We can't know what we don't know, and we can't know everything.
Yeah. Well said, my friend. So yeah, for next time, brother, I mean, let me know. I'm happy to jump on, man. We can do this again, or again, I can just answer questions via email, whatever's
Sounds
better, I
good.
guess.
Yeah, man. Okay. Well, thanks a lot. And
Of course.
thanks for watching, everybody.
Yeah. Appreciate it. We'll see you guys next time.
All right. And